Hello, this is Dr. Troy with Dr. Josh and Marque. We're here today. We're here today. We're here today to talk about some current events and specifically in what's in the news and blood clots and a lot of things as far as how to stay healthy. So when it comes to this scenario. So this week, in fact, in one day, really, it was a pretty interesting news day. So if you're listening to this podcast later on, we're in the season where we heard in one day or within about a 2-3 day stretch, there was an ESPN announcer that went down during an episode, Real Madrid versus AC Milan, and then there was LeBron James' son had a cardiac arrest, and who else? It's the singer from...
it was Tori Kelly.
Tori Kelly, yes, thank you. She had blood clots that were identified. Jamie Foxx did an interview and gave an update, and he's doing much better, I hear, thankfully. But that was something that happened back in April where he had some bizarre things. We've not heard what caused that. And then Mitch McConnell yesterday had an event, and so... I saw an interview afterwards where he kind of walked by quickly, and the reporters were rightly concerned what was going on. Are you okay? Are you okay? And he kind of blew it off. Well, we got to talk about the elephant in the room a little bit as far as what is going on with all of these people. And I'm not going to tiptoe around anything. The way that we kind of process that, at the day and the age that we're at, you have to put through the filter of what could be possibly going on. You just have to add the vaccines to that conversation. Yeah. So you have to look at that. There are many things that can cause these cardiovascular type conditions. And in looking at Mitch McConnell in particular, because that was live on camera, you can see it. He had the blank stare. We see that with seizure disorders. We see that with microclotting. So it's something that we see and can recognize. A lot of different things can cause that. Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about the recent news, the possibilities of the vaccine and other things that can kind of contribute to that. Specifically, let's see if we can answer things about how to keep your blood vessels and your cardiovascular system healthy.
Yeah. I think we should say, too, we're not trying to blame everything on the vaccine. I know.
I am.
Are you?
Now, yes,
You're trying to blame it all? Okay, that's fine. Somebody's going to take that soundbite.
Yes, I know they will. Yeah. Yeah, you're right on that.
Yeah. But just like you said, we can't completely ignore it. There has to be a discussion allowing for the possibility both directions.
Yeah, the problem is when you shut down the discussion, and we've talked about this in the past, when you shut down the discussion, it's hard to discern properly. Yeah. You can't discern the truth. Yeah. And we would never make a diagnosis off of just an assumption, and you'd have to do the testing. You have to ask a lot of questions, and you have to look at all the differential diagnoses. So you got to do the same thing. But the fact that, and truthfully, we won't know. We talked about this really early on with COVID. We're not going to know the actual numbers until we see the all-cause mortality later on when it came to the flu versus COVID. And so we're starting to see a lot of the numbers a year later, 2 years later. A lot of things are getting cleaned up. Same thing for the vaccines. We know that the risk factors with these vaccines were heart disease first and foremost. Do we have an increased incidence in heart disease with the elderly, with the young? Those stats are going to be coming out. Yeah. We're having to seeing high-profile cases right now, and it may be part of that. So we'll see on that.
I don't think it's a coincidence that certain countries outlawed or banned the vaccine for younger male age groups for this very reason. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of the individuals suffering are younger, and a lot of them are male. Just because their cardiovascular systems are going to be more likely to be compromised with this type of inflammation.
Yeah, and we know that, and that risk factor was known. It wasn't an unknown. So a lot of the decision-making that was made by people in charge, they knew those risk factors too, but when they made some decisions, some tough decisions. We also know that some of the risk factors moving forward were autoimmune diseases after the cardiac problems, and then cancers. Yeah. So in that order, usually is what we'd see kind of pop up there. So we will start to get the data soon and start to see the differences in the cardiovascular disease compared to years previous. then autoimmune, then cancers. In 5 years, we'll have the data on that.
So stay tuned for that podcast.
Yeah, stay tuned for that podcast. But that's what, so for me, first do no harm means first do no harm, especially when there are natural alternatives to actually be healthy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's try and get some solutions out there. So even if you have concerns, first of all, don't be worried, number one, because that doesn't help at all. Yeah. The stress of worrying is only going to cause, well, that by itself can cause cardiovascular disease by just its free radical production. Yeah. But we do want to give some insight in how you can actually assess and make sure that your cardiovascular system is working well, especially if you have concerns about COVID or the vaccines that might have been triggering some cardiovascular issues for you.
Yeah, especially for people who have gotten vaccinated. We're not here to razz on you and say that you're a terrible person. No. I know a lot of people who did it for good intentions and good reasons, especially early.
Absolutely.
And this also doesn't mean that it's hopeless. I mean, I think this is part of the point too, is regardless if this is an issue from COVID or COVID vaccines, being proactive, you can still make a difference. You can still reverse damage and be proactive about protecting yourself.
Absolutely. The heart, the blood vessels can repair. And so we've seen that pretty well just in the past too. Like smoking historically damages your arteries very, very badly, and you can recover from that.
Turns out humans are fairly resilient to a lot of junk that we throw at ourselves.
Yeah, we can take a lot apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we look at that, I want to start going through some symptoms that may be early signs of some cardiovascular. The first one that pops to mind for me, one of my patients who was vaccine injured had a pretty long clot in his leg, and fortunately nothing happened. It was caught early. It wasn't caught early, sorry. It was a good 3.5 feet long. It was a really major clot. Yeah. But he went in early with his first symptom, which was shortness of breath. So it was the lungs. It was going up the stairs that all of a sudden he's like, why? And he's in his early 40s, and so he's like, well, it doesn't make sense that I'm out of breath just like that. Yeah. So they went and got checked, and the doctor did a great job and found the clot. This particular individual had a genetic clotting disorder, which predisposed him even more so. Yeah. So that is, though, true for everyone. So if you're starting to have a little bit of shortness of breath, and it's not due to allergies, it's not due to food reactions or constipation, because that can also do it, it's something that can be an early indication of some cardiovascular compromise, specifically clotting.
I just talked to a patient yesterday about that. New patient had issues with breathing and lung stuff prior to COVID, but having COVID, and I believe she had one vaccine as well. But anyways, the same thing. Leg pain, shortness of breath up the stairs. Yep. It's like, okay, well, that's fairly uncommon for otherwise healthy people to all of a sudden get those symptoms. So that is a red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Other than shortness of breath, have you seen anything as far as an early indication for not just clotting, because clotting is a tough one to catch early, but just because people are going to see these videos, they're going to see these well-known, famous people, because this all happened. The majority of these were announced within a 24-hour period. So everyone's talking about it. And so what can people do as far as observation? What else have you seen that might be an early indication of some cardiovascular issues?
Yeah, well, I would say fatigue is another one, more kind of nondescript, and that happens with a lot of things. Fatigue goes along with the shortness of breath, but that happens a lot. Neurological symptoms, we've talked dizziness before on the podcast. That's a big one. A lot of the issues with the inflammation caused by the vaccine and COVID, we've talked about the idea of microclotting. So it's not like not everybody's getting big old clots that are causing cardiac arrests. But you're getting a bunch of inflammation in the blood vessels, so that compromises energy production because you don't have oxygen delivery. Compromises brain function. And even I've seen a few people then where it's kidneys. I've seen a few people where it's other organ systems not working.
Right. So let me land on that one, because kidneys and dehydration is a quick way to really get your heart in trouble if you're exercising. So for young athletes, for guys, you have to stay hydrated right now. Because if your kidneys become challenged at all because of lack of hydration, then the minerals get out of balance. That can cause problems with the heart. And traditionally, before COVID and vaccines, that's when we saw guys, football players in particular, big heavy linemen, go down because they were in heat and they got overheated quite a bit, dehydrated significantly, and their heart couldn't take it. So stay hydrated. That's going to help with inflammation. Inflammation means fire, basically. So that's a big one. Some of the other early signs that we've seen is if you're young and your heart is racing or doesn't slow down appropriately after some exercise. So if you're a soccer player and you're out on the pitch and you're running around and all of a sudden you're not recovering like you used to, that's a potential sign of some challenges.
Yeah. Again, another patient that I recently talked to, kid, probably 14, is saying, "Oh, why all of a sudden am I getting dizzy and a little lightheaded when I'm at practice?"
Yeah.
And it's like, man, we got to get that checked because that could be the exact issue where we're getting a little bit of a compromise in blood flow or heart function.
Yep.
And the kid was vaccinated too. And again, he didn't have it beforehand. These are all circumstantial.
Yep.
But again, when you see it and you say, well, we at least have to take that into consideration, that we have to fix that problem.
Yes, and so with that, we also look at things like even the heart skipping a beat, just weird, little palpitations, and then even increased blood pressure. We're starting to see that in 18, 19-year-olds as well, which is abnormal. So if you're athletic and not overweight and you've taken blood pressure and it's been good, and all of a sudden it's going up, then that's a potential sign that there's some stiffness and resistance going on in the heart and cardiovascular system, so it should be checked and looked at as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing that we've seen as well, other than the fatigue, the heart racing, things of that nature, really the recovery too, as far as just like the muscles and stuff too. The fatigue in the brain is one thing, but the muscle
soreness or
soreness. The delayed onset muscle soreness can start to take longer than it normally would. So little things to look at if you are exercising and then all of a sudden it's just not healing like it used to or recovering as quickly. That can be another big
ear
sign.
ringing. I've seen a lot of that. The tinnitus, that's a big thing too.
Yeah, that's lack of oxygen, even like being forgetful when it's not. Teenagers are forgetful. I'm going to say that they just are, but young adults and if it's not stress-induced, lack of sleep-induced, low blood sugar-induced forgetfulness, then that's another potential marker.
Yeah.
So I do hope that people start having these conversations at a bigger level. I'm going to say, Jamie Foxx has come out. We still don't know what really was going on with him. He hasn't given any details. And it's none of our business except for the times that we're in, because now everyone is wondering. Yeah. And so it's one of those things where if it is, I would just like to know a little bit more about.
It's a public health concern.
It is,
so many people got the COVID vaccine. If these individuals are experiencing these problems, and that's a correlation between everything, I mean, that's a concern for everybody who's gotten the vaccine.
My 2 cents is if they were concerned when COVID was going around, if someone had COVID to not spread it, then they should be just as concerned about if people are having issues with the vaccine or not having issues with the vaccine.
Yeah.
Peace of mind is what people need, because just seeing these things is causing stress in people who are vaccinated. Yeah. It's just seeing these things like, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake? And so this is something that has to be talked about. It's the elephant in the room, basically. And so it needs to not be ignored or dismissed. You're just making people angry when you do that or not talk about it. Yeah. This is not anything against Jamie Foxx. I'm talking in general, en masse. Yeah. Like ESPN and these things go viral very quickly these days. So within minutes, everyone was seeing the collapse of.
And everybody wants either to immediately blame the vaccine without information, which could or could not be true. But on the other side, everybody immediately says, oh, it can't be the vaccine.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
which is also not
can
true.
Be.
Yes, right. Yeah. So we need clarity, and you can't get clarity. That'd be like a patient coming in and saying, fix me, but we're not allowed to ask them questions
no
or have
questions.
conversations.
Can't order labs.
Can't order labs, no data.
Yeah.
You just, don't worry, just fix me. I'm like, no, I need information. We need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So, and that's all we're really asking for is, and it will come out because we're talking about it. Other people are going to be talking about it. I guarantee you Joe Rogan is going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So there's going to be conversations being had. I did see Elon Musk actually tweeted something about it. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but he basically saying it has to be part of the conversation. He wasn't saying this is vaccine. He just said, same thing we're saying right now. Yeah. And that's 100% accurate.
Can you call it a tweet anymore now that he changed the name?
Oh, that's right.
To...
What do you call it? It's an X.
I don't know. It's confusing.
He X'd.
He X'd this.
He X'd that.
No.
Yeah. So what can people do to help with their cardiovascular system? We've landed on making sure you're drinking lots of water, having awareness, number two, as far as what's...
and you mentioned electrolytes too. Yeah,
Electrolytes, really important.
It's ultimately your heart is an electrical
it is.
discharge. I mean, that's what pumps your heart.
Yep.
We have a lot of tests that we run here, other than symptoms, the symptoms that we mentioned, blood testing.
Yep.
We do a fair amount of inflammatory testing, especially with our more advanced cardiometabolic testing.
Yeah.
That correlates to, there's a lot of those markers were studied for COVID inflammation, so it correlates with this too.
A lot of the same ones. Let's go through some of those right now for the people that can't make it to the clinic but are listening to this even outside the country. We've got fibrinogen, which is very important, and I can tell there's been a lot of fibrinogen testing going on around the country because the labs that use fibrinogen have a supply chain issue going on right now.
One of our main labs stopped even offering it.
Yeah. So we had to start looking elsewhere.
Luckily, we'd have another option.
Yeah. So that tells us a lot too, that the demand is pretty high to be testing it, but it's a good test.
Yep.
Also, D-dimer it can give you kind of a quick snapshot on what's going on there.
Yeah.
C-reactive protein is a good test for inflammation in the arteries, as is the ESR.
Yeah, or SED rate. Yep.
Yeah, SED rate or ESR.
Yep.
So those are some good starts. Anything else that can give you some insight?
In our more advanced cardiometabolic testing, we'll sometimes look at MPO, myeloperoxidase. That's a test that's has some research out there per COVID and inflammation.
It's also a predictive marker for cardiac arrest, for an actual event. So getting that MPO in range is a pretty big
I've used N-acetylcysteine for that successfully.
Yeah.
I know there's a few other options too. This is another one that we stopped having good access to. It's called NT-proBNP.
Yeah.
That's a marker of cardiac muscle stress. That's a really good one in this situation.
Yes.
And one of our labs stopped carrying it.
Yeah.
We can still get it. It's more expensive now, of course.
Yeah.
The good ones.
The good ones,
more expensive.
Yeah, and I believe that was a supply chain issue as well there.
Yeah.
So that one, those ones are very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important. We're embarking on more of a fitness kick here at Synapse. One of the fitness tests that we are going to run is if you're bad at it, is a huge predictor of cardiac mortality. It's called a heart rate recovery test.
Yeah.
And that test says if you're doing a hard activity, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you're going hard. Could be a long run, could be a short burst activity. How long does it take for your heart rate or how many points does it drop in a minute? And if you don't drop, I think 12 is a cutoff. If you're below 12, if you don't drop 12 points in a minute, that's bad, really bad. Should be about 18 to 20. I know Dr. Ashley and I have been testing this back and forth. I think she and I tend to be around 30 to 40.
Yeah.
So after a minute, it's dropping that much. So that's telling you that your heart is recovering from that exercise fast. And if that recovery is really bad,
there's a problem.
And that's pretty easy thing to test. If you're in shape enough to work out, if you just take your heart rate right at the end of the intense exercise, take it for 10 seconds and multiply by 6 to get kind of that beats per minute. Then wait a minute, walk around a little bit and do it again.
Yeah.
And then just do the math. If it was at 180 and then 170, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, and these are the things that actually should be done right now.
Yeah.
And not just clinics like ours, but
That's
all
an easy
health.
test.
It's an easy test. You
Yeah.
can do it at home.
Yeah.
But even the clinics should be doing these things to
Mm-hmm.
actually get some predictive markers on, okay, you need to pay attention. There's something going on here.
Yeah.
And truthfully, here's the blessing that's going to come out of this. A lot of people that it has nothing to do with COVID or vaccines are going to identify heart issues that are lifestyle related.
Yeah.
Something from high fructose corn syrup, and they've been over consuming these bad carbs and sugars, causing actual cardiac stress, and those will get cleaned up. And that's why, like, our focus right now, as you said, is on improving fitness. We've been working pretty hard in the last year on a lot of these things, but releasing that, can we say we're basically going to be releasing that in the next week or two? So if you're listening to this, it'll be coming out soon for the public, so it's not just us testing ourselves anymore.
It's me and Ashley get the
It's
benefit.
just, yes. So those are things to just bring awareness, because here's the problem. When it comes to the things that really people struggle with when it comes to dying, heart disease and cancer, people a lot of times make healthcare decisions based on their pain levels. And when do you have pain with heart disease? At the event.
Yeah.
And when do you have pain with cancer? Sometimes never, but usually when it's
never.
too late and it's at the end stage there. So we have to look at functional loss. And so the more you kind of look through a deeper microscope where you can actually see and measure things, you actually get a lot of clarity. We're so busy with life. Everyone's working hard, and if they have families, you can miss these little markers. So take time to assess right now, especially the cardiovascular components.
Can you look up, Marque? There's a statistic. It's the number of people where their first heart attack is their first symptom of any sort of cardiovascular disease, right? It seems like nothing's wrong, and then they have the heart attack. That's exactly what you're saying. It's a pretty big number, and I don't want to guess, and so that's why I'm asking.
Let me know when you got it.
Yeah.
So I do want to bring up one other thing, because I get this question a lot, and up until recently, I kept saying I have no evidence of this, I have no evidence of this, but the whole shedding thing. So I have been asked, and I'll ask you if you've landed on anything, but I've been asked quite a bit, well, what about shedding? And there's stories out there of women who were in menopause, all of a sudden started getting their periods back again temporarily after being around someone who either had who had just recently been vaccinated. And I couldn't land on it physiologically of how that was happening. I do know now that spike proteins by themselves can trigger the ACE receptor response to the inflammation. So there is an actual mechanism.
I think there is, because I saw some studies, and I haven't looked at it recently, honestly, but a few studies that showed that it can show up in biological fluid, the spike protein. I think it was a urine test, and maybe I don't think it was a breath test. Point being, though, you can extrapolate a bit and say, well, if it's getting into body fluid, is it possible that you could breathe it out? I don't think it's impossible.
No,
but that's in a well-functioning society, that would be something where the people in charge would say, well, this is an interesting thing. We should be able to study that.
Yes.
We are not such a society. But if that's the case, there are certain people, and again, I've heard patient stories, you've heard patient stories, where it seems like that really could be the case for why they're getting triggered and inflamed.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we have to look at, and there's a doctor, I am looking at her research right now on the West Coast. She's in Washington State, and she's convinced that it's a thing, and she is releasing the evidence from her personal laboratory. So I'm vetting that process right now, but
it should be testable.
It should be, it's testable. And then, but what I can say is that some people are concerned that the spike proteins will actually, just like the vaccine, affect our RNA, and it's a different process. At this point, the spike protein's been made. It's not necessarily the messaging system that was in the vaccine that caused you to make the spike proteins. It would just be the spike proteins, which causes damage, which means that you should be able to avoid that contact. It should go away. Versus there was one study early on, I've not seen it, this has been followed up on, where they had concerns that the vaccine was inducing some self-replicating DNA, where it's creating its own DNA, similar to what the HIV virus does.
Yeah, it's like
So I've not seen anything duplicated with that at this point.
Yeah. Do Do you have a good sense of, so let's say person has a vaccine, person has COVID, person has exposure to vaccine spike protein shedding, any of those possible scenarios. How do you get rid of the spike protein?
So Dr. McCullough actually has a product that binds the spike proteins, and it's got things like nattokinase in there.
Yeah.
Ivermectin, actually, funny enough, is a weak binder as well, and a mild anti-inflammatory. It works with that.
Yeah.
The frontline doctors, I recently heard Dr. Corey speak to the fact that he feels some of his long-haul COVID and vaccine-injured patients need to be on ivermectin the rest of their life because of when they go off, they start feeling worse.
Yeah.
So that's, we don't understand why that is. And it makes sense that they might actually be making their own spike proteins, and that's why you need something constantly binding it. So there might be something along those lines. We don't know why, but the lumbrokinase, omega oils do help. Certain binders, traditional binders, also can help. Zeolite and activated charcoal, things like that, a little bit.
I do find it instructive to look at their website every once in a while because they do a good job. The FLCCC, those frontline, that group, they do a good job of still updating their protocols, and they have a post-vaccine protocol. And viewing what's in there, I think tells you a lot about what the current state of the art is.
Yes.
They talk about hyperbaric. They talk about things from a mitochondrial support, methylene blue, oxygen delivery and blood flow.
Yes.
And it's very clear that cardiovascular compromise is the tipping point for most people in this situation.
And I encourage people to actually look up Dr. Pierre Corey's information. He is doing a really good job of dotting his I's, crossing the T's when it comes to working with his patients, but he is actively trying to engage in a conversation as far as this is what we're seeing, what's going on here, and he's getting attacked. And so we had, I just heard an interview with him where he feels like the medical community needs to regain the trust back of the people, and the doctors have lost faith in the medical community, and that's a problem. And so the doctors, and he in particular, was talking about medical journals in this particular interview, how he was very disappointed with the medical journals and the lack of integrity with some of the research. And so that was published, and some of the ones that wasn't published, and just some of ethics stuff. It was a brilliant interview. And he told his personal story of how he has been attacked as far as just publicly.
I'm sure he has.
Yeah. But also his just major disappointment in the areas that he trusted in the medical community, more in the regulatory side of things, the CDC, the NIH, but in particular, he's a research hound, and so the medical journals that he loved, he just had he's lost faith. That's so they have to win that back. So we've got a lot of cleanup to do, and people just want the truth. And so I am 100% open to being wrong on everything that I'm talking about if it serves my patient population. I don't care about being right or wrong. I'm going to make the best decision, though, based on the information I have at hand, and move forward with the intent of helping.
It's just never been harder to verify facts.
Yes, that's a great way of saying it. I would. You guys should hear. I mean, we're having conversations now, but you should hear some of the conversations we have when we're like, because you guys know there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and many of them have come true, but many of them are just like crazy. And so we have to, at this point, as doctors say, do you think it's real, this one? Some of them are just nuts, but we have to at least bring it up and say, no, I don't think that's a real thing. Or like the conversations we're having are just bizarre compared to 5 years ago.
Very bizarre.
So, but you have to discern through that because there is a truth and there's an answer to every problem. So keep digging. And all I can tell you is when someone is blocking you from having the conversation, then that's a big red flag. And so we have to clean up that first. You have to be free to be able to discuss it. And of course, everyone's entitled to opinion, but some of the discernment should be having good forums to listen to opinions. I'm not going to go to Facebook and look at my neighbor's opinions on stuff if they're not an expert, and I know I can see him drinking on his balcony and he's inebriated giving opinions about whatever, on whatever side of whatever topic. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just not going to happen. So, but certain people that do their due diligence who are at risk of losing their jobs, those people I give a lot of credibility to, because they're not doing it for good reasons of, I'm going to get wealthy from this, I'm going to get famous from this. They're doing it knowing they're possibly not going to be able to feed their family anymore.
It's a fairly good filter. If that person stands to lose everything,
yes,
the likelihood that their line is lower.
It's a good filter.
Yeah.
Back to the heart attacks from no symptoms.
Yep.
Like we're close to 50%.
Isn't it? Yeah.
50%.
That's high.
That's actually higher than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think they had it around 20% in 2022. But experts are thinking it's closer to 50% now.
Jeez.
So what happened in 20? No, I'm not going to.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Yes.
Point taken.
Yes. All right. So I want to touch on one more thing. When it comes to cardiovascular health, vitamin D is also very important, and vitamin K. And then oils, good, healthy, clean oils. We talk about this a lot, but we need those oils for anti-inflammatories, and so they help quite a bit. So I encourage people to really look at olive oils in particular. We've talked about this in previous podcasts. Clean oils, and what were we talking about this morning? The oil, the codfish, cod liver, codfish, cod liver oil. And so these oils are very, very good for us and very good for our heart system as well. Yeah. I'm going to say this too: good, deep, quality sleep, and just consistent exercise. And if you're not an exerciser, start small and slowly ramp up. One of the things that I have noticed, I've had some of my people who have been injured, who have had events, be very, very, they're frightened to go back to exercise. Yeah. And it's similar to working with like football players who have blew out a knee or something, and they have to slowly get going. They have to eventually trust that they can cut left or cut right on that knee, because if it happens again, they're gone for another 6, 9, 12 months. Yeah, it's huge. And it's so there's a huge mental component once you kind of get to that stage, and so overcoming that is not that easy.
Oh, that's why you don't want to guess. That's why we talk about these lab markers and other things that you can do, and we should talk about Endopat.
Yes,
yeah, because that's another tool that we use to track the vascular health.
Yes, if you there's not a lot of clinics that use the Endopat. A lot of them do for research, like Mayo Clinic and U of M here in Minnesota. As far as I know, we're still the only clinic that has Endopat, especially using natural therapeutics. Yeah. But the Endopat measures the lining of the arteries, the glycocalyx, if you will, and the inside of the artery, and then how stiff the artery is. Yep. So if there's been an injury or you have too much cholesterol or plaquing, it'll stiffen. It also measures your neurologic response as it regulates that arterial system, which Dr. Josh was talking about. It's electrical circuit. So those three markers give you a lot of information of how balanced you are. And we've had 19-year-olds come in with arteries of a 70, 80-year-old smoker, and we've had 70 and 80-year-old smokers who've able to get more like 60 and 70-year-old smokers get their arteries back. So
it is reversible.
It is reversible, but it's a good tool.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people coming in now concerned about the vaccine or COVID, doing just that. We do offer that on our website. I believe we may have a tab now under the program tab. If you go to our website, there's a vaccine tab there, or if you're interested in that, you can learn more. I know you've got a video on there as well.
Yep.
And
yes.
You can, if you're local, I mean, we've got a way for you to just come in and do that test, and then we do an assessment and tell you what it means.
Yes. Yeah. We have a lot of people actually fly in for the day and get tested, and then come back. If it's good, they don't come back. They don't need to come back.
Peace of mind. Yeah. I mean, it's a good peace of mind.
Yes, absolutely. So any last thoughts as far as what people can do to help their circulation, their cardiovascular?
Yeah. Well, the basics, you mentioned a few, right?
Yep.
Sleep well, eat well.
Yes.
Try not to stress. Easier said than done.
Yep.
Drink enough water.
Yes.
And get some tests done to see if you got inflammation.
Yep, love it.
Yep.
Well, I hope you guys, this served you well, and I'm hoping that there's less of this in the media, but my gut tells me there's going to be a little bit more. And when we start hitting the autoimmune and cancer stages of this scenario, we'll definitely be here for podcasts.
We'll be back.
Yep. Take care, everyone.